Hey you guys, and welcome back. I wanted to do this message because, as I said before, in our community we are very cliquish. You have people on differing sides, and they, for some reason, for whatever reason, fail to recognize the truth in what the other side is saying. So they go all in on their position, right? And I wanted to talk about this in relation to police brutality versus people just not raising their children. Okay. One thing about my dad, I grew up with my mom and my dad. Me and all of my siblings did. We had both parents in the household all of our childhood. Okay. And one of the things that my dad would talk about, he would talk about how people would just let their kids go, wouldn't raise their kids, and then when something happens to them, go running out into the street screaming, Lord, they don't did this and that to my child, boo hoo hoo. My parents were a big proponent of parents raising, not just being in the household with their kids, because I think that's what a lot of adults fail to realize. You can both be in the household with your kids, and you can be living just regular, everyday adult lifehood, going to work, coming home, taking care of the home, washing dishes, washing clothes, cleaning, budgeting for the household, paying the bills. But you actively have to parent your children. You have to decide what kind of people you want your children to grow up as and actively instill that into them, because children come in as a blank slate, right? So you have to actively instill those things into your children. Now, there have been cases and have been situations to where it was just excessive force or police brutality that should not have happened. Tamir Rice should have never happened. A Tatiana Jefferson should have never happened. John Crawford should have never happened. Ayanna Stanley Jones should have never happened. George Floyd should have never happened. You can say he was a criminal, he was a this, he was on drugs or whatever, but he didn't do anything to warrant him being killed in that moment. He didn't do anything in that moment for someone to have to put their knee on his neck until he died. There was just no excuse and no cause for that. I even saw a couple gentlemen, black men, who have a channel on YouTube, and one of them was trying to make the case that the case of Tony Tempa was the same as George Floyd. Well, it wasn't. Even though it was unfortunate and it shouldn't have happened, it was not the same. One, the officer didn't have his knee on his neck. He had it on his back. And the gentleman, who was white, he was having a mental health episode. And so they had him on the ground, and one of the police officers had his knee in his back. But I don't know if it was because he was in such a mental state he couldn't say that he couldn't breathe, or he was having issues breathing. But I never heard him express or vocalize that he couldn't breathe or he was having trouble breathing. Now, I can't understand, and maybe, in the police training, there's some reason that they give for putting and holding your knee in someone's back. I don't know, but you would think that if people are continually dying from this sort of thing, that there would be a change in policy and training, right? Because a police officer is going to act according to their training, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that if you see that something is having fatal results, that you can't change it and train in a different way. The second thing was that Tony Tempa was out there by himself. There weren't people standing around saying, you're killing him, he can't breathe, let up. So there's a lot of differences between the two. What happened to Tony was not acceptable, right? It wasn't right, but it wasn't equivalent. It wasn't the same as George Floyd. And that's the issue that I have, is that when you have black people who so-called are telling the truth about the black community, they will oftentimes attempt to blur the lines and say things that aren't true in an attempt to align themselves with a certain set of talking points by certain sectors. So now you have white people flooding those news stories of where this happens, saying, oh, well, people aren't paying attention to it because it's a white man. People aren't, doing this because it's a white man. These cops need to, be fired. Now they're all up in arms and saying that something needs to be done about the police officers who did this, when they spent all this time trying to shut down the conversation whenever black people would bring up the fact that there were unarmed black people being killed by the police and being killed unnecessarily. So during all that time, white people were steadily trying to make the case, well, there are more white people being killed by the police. And they weren't saying that in an attempt to say, hey, look, we've noticed that a lot of our people are being killed by the police as well. So why don't your community and my community get together and try to figure out a solution to put an end to this? They were saying that in order to try to shut down the conversation, to say, well, more of our people are being killed by the police, so you should just shut up about your people being killed by the police. And so that type of attitude winds up coming back to bite them, because they're being killed too. But the only time they care about it is when they can use it as a way to shut up black people and to shut down the conversation that they are having. And so that's why I don't ascribe to this, these talking points sort of things, all these different cliques, to where you have black people who are speaking about the things that are going on in the black community, but they try to make it seem as if it's, all of it is equal, all of it is the same. Whatever's happening to black people is also happening to white people, is happening in the same proportion, is no different. So black people need to shut up, and they just need to focus on putting themselves up by the bootstraps, and not realizing that that kind of rhetoric is hurting white people, the white people who they are aligning themselves with, just as much as it's hurting black people. Because you're not talking about the issues that are impacting white communities and white children. You're using them, you're using those, white people, their lives, their children, as a sacrifice to be able to use it as a weapon against black people who are speaking up about the issues that impact black people. You see more and more black people who are speaking up about the things that are going on in the black community, and they're acting as if, these poor, unfortunate white people are just sitting there being all innocent, living just like Little House on the Prairie. They ain't bothering nothing. Ain't nobody in their community committing no crime. It's only the evil black people. Meanwhile, at the same time where you have all of this killing and going on in the black community, you having mass shootings, and many of these mass shootings are impacting white people, young and old. Now, there's a difference between someone who's trying to use this as a come up, right? They're trying to show white people that they're on their side so that they can, benefit from this, versus people who are speaking about the issues in the black community because they care about their community and because there are certain things that need to change to benefit us as a people. Now, the troubling thing that I see going on in our community, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video, is saying that every time a black person is shot or killed by the police, that is police brutality. And what that ends up doing is that ends up actually hurting the black community, because some of these people have no respect for authority, period. These are some of the same people that would kill or harm their own parents. That's what's so disturbing about all these anti-Asian hate crimes that people are trying to act like are going on, because many of these Asian people who are being attacked or, killed or whatever, they're coming into contact with people who, if it was me, and these same people saw me as an easy target, they would do the same thing to me. It has nothing to do with them being Asian. It has something to do with the people who are doing these things just having either mental illness or criminal behavior. My dad grew up in an area and a time where he actually saw black people hanging from trees. He actually saw people get maimed and brutalized just at the appearance that they might be reading. And when he saw some of these instances where people were, exposed to police brutality, he said, well, why is the person doing that? If they just be quiet and sit in their car and wait, the police officer is going to come there and tell them why they pull them over. My dad was a black man. I have black brothers. All of them have had encounters with the police, and they live to tell about it. My dad instructed us about having respect for authority, because as children growing up, we were expected to respect their authority. But you got too many people who will see this kind of disrespectful, out of control behavior in their children, and they let it go on, and then they think that because it's their child that there will never be any repercussions, that anyone who their child comes in contact with should just continually put up with their mess, their disrespect, their aggressive, nasty behavior, they should put up with it because their parents put up with it. And now you have these people in our community who are trying to make the case that black men and black males should be able to just do whatever they want to do to whoever, whenever, and there should never be any consequences for them. My daddy was the kind of person to where, if you just went out there and just lost your mind and was going crazy and, hurting other people and stuff like that, he wasn't going to help you. He wasn't going to come and help you. He would let you sit in it. And the one thing about my daddy, he was that way with the girls and with the boys. So in us seeing that and being raised around my mom and daddy and knowing that to be the case, that kind of helped us to understand, hey, you can't get out here in these streets and lose your mind and just do whatever, whenever, unless you want to sit in those consequences. Children have to have structure and they have to have discipline. And as parents, you have to set a standard for their behavior. That black man in New York, I think it was, that beat and stomped that 60-something-year-old Asian woman, that man had killed his mama. So was his mama Asian? There was somebody that if he had ran up on me or some other, more than likely, I don't know if he has ever attacked any men, but if he had ran up on another black woman, he would more than likely do the same. I know many of the men in our community want things to continue the way they are, to where black women just baby and coddle and make excuses for them. But it actually ends up harming you, black women. Because in our communities, black women and children, especially little girls, are catching it. Black males do not need any more babying and coddling. Black women have babied and coddled black males to the point to where it's killing all of us in the community. Please stop babying and coddling these males. They need more discipline and more structure. They don't need less. They don't need any help for you to make it easier for them to live down to the expectations placed on them. And if you don't feel like you can raise them appropriately to where they don't become a statistic and wind up breaking your heart, because that's what's happening with a lot of these black mothers, is that, they didn't check their sons when they were going the wrong way. They didn't put in any standards for them because they felt sorry for them being a black male growing up in America and the white man and this, that, and the third. And so they get out there and they run up on somebody who ain't gonna baby and coddle them the way that you do. And next thing you know, something happens to them and you sitting there crying and boo-hooing and brokenhearted because you done lost your child. But the babying and the coddling of the males in our community is killing all of us. And the thing about it is, you can only talk to black men for so long. If black men are just hell-bent on throwing their black face up on this social media and the internet saying how they ain't gonna do this, they ain't gonna protect black women, they ain't gonna stay and raise their children, they're not gonna do this, that, and the third, okay. They don't told you who they are. Now it's time for you to believe them and act accordingly. Men who don't protect and provide don't deserve children. Point blank, period. That's one thing I can say. Another thing I can say about my dad, because you got a lot of these males out here thinking that if you pay child support and you go pick up your child every other week, that's being a daddy. That's good enough. You can go around and create all these kids, and as long as you pick them up every now and then and pay $25 a week, then that's being a good dad. And no one will step up and tell black males that a part of being a good dad means you are there in that household with that child to not only provide, but to also protect. That was one thing growing up that I really appreciated about having my dad in the house with us, is we grew up in the hood, okay? We grew up in the hood. And down in the South, there is a time of the year to where, it's getting ready to go from summer to fall. And it's too cool to have the air running, but it's also not cool enough to run the heat. So if it gets warm in the house, you just raise the windows. And that was the one thing that I appreciated about having my dad in the house, was because we could sleep with our windows open. We had 2 big dogs in the backyard and my daddy in the house. And everybody in the neighborhood, that house over there has a tall, loud country black man who lives there, who walks around with a gun that looks like a baby bazooka, and he wish somebody would think about coming up in that house or even coming up in his yard. That's the benefit of having a father in the house with his family. Everybody in the neighborhood knew that it was a man that lived in the house. They knew about my mama and us kids, but they knew it was a man in the house. They didn't even mess around our house when my daddy wasn't at the house because they didn't know when he was coming back. It wasn't even that they wouldn't try to break it. They wouldn't even come up in the yard. You see what I'm saying? That's the benefit. I remember one time I was sitting in the living room and the dogs had started barking and my daddy went to go look out the window to see, what the dog saw. And I saw my daddy run back to the room and I saw him get his gun and he went to the door and he went outside. And I heard him saying something, but I couldn't make out what it was. And he comes back in and he said that it was a guy standing out there in front of the house getting ready to, urinate in the street in front of our house. And my daddy went out there and told him, said, hey, man, I got a wife and kids in here. Can you take that elsewhere? And the guy just said, yeah, man. And he walked on. No argument, no fussing, no problems, no nothing. That's the benefit of not just having a male in the house, but a man in the house who is aware of what's going around his home and watching out for his household. That's why I wanted to change the direction of my channel, because I have always put forth the notion that black women should band together as like-minded black women and to move as a collective to the benefit of black women and black girls. So that is why I changed my channel structure to be focused just to that end. Because by now, it's been over 10 years that black men and black males have been allowed to do this with the help of social media platforms, right? So it's time to kind of direct that energy to black women coming together and recognizing the things that we have been going through historically up until this time so that we can begin to look at what is the state of black women and black girls today and where do we want it to be and start to work towards that. And then whatever the black men or black males are doing over on their end, then just let them continue to do that. But I do think that, I know a lot of black women are trying to do this. Oh, well, I'm just an individual. Okay, but I don't think that that's going to have any long-term benefit because you living as an individual, that's what has left black people as a whole so vulnerable because we pretty much live individually except for superficial, frivolous type stuff. And so that winds up making you a target to anyone who's looking for prey. The fact that black women won't band together is the reason why black men and black males have been so successful in their attack against us because black women are so scattered. Either they're in the corner of the black men doing the damage, and that means that they're willing to overlook what is happening to them at the hands of black men, or they're just out doing and living their individual lives. So that when they're out there and something happens with them, the rest of the black women are just like, going on about their business and about their life because to them, you're just an individual. I don't think that that's the best route to go. I don't think that's going to be the most beneficial to black women and black girls. I think that so much more can be done to improve our state that we aren't utilizing because from the looks of it, it looks like the black women who are opening their eyes to what is happening with black women and black girls spend so much of their time giving everything to the benefit of black males and black men that now when it comes time to focus on black women, they just too exhausted and too tired and too wore out. But I think that if black women will change that mindset and take that same effort and focus and attention and apply it to black women and black girls. Yes, I know we still have the black women who are dead set on being black male focused, and there's nothing that you can do about that right now. But if like-minded black women would start to band together and work towards the benefit and improving the state of black women and black girls, those women who are over there right now being black male focused and black male centered will eventually be along. Right? Because I've seen this even in my time here on YouTube. You have black women who are all about black love and black men and black families and this, that, and the third. But eventually they see the light because eventually those same black men and black males who they are focused on and supporting and condoning, they eventually turn on them. They eventually turn on them. And there's nothing that you can do or say to get them to see the light until that happens. It's unfortunate, but that's just how it is right now. Sometimes you have to start things off small and grow them to the point to where they need to be. And you can't wait on each and every person to jump on board. That's why when I hear black people talk about, you need to stop being Christian because you need to come over here and be an Egyptologist and a Kemet and a hoodoo voodoo and a witch and this, that, and the third. And then you look over there and those populations of black people who have taken up those things and they're not doing any better. But they look at black people who are Christian, and it's strange because it's never the Muslims, it's never the nation of Islam, even though the Arabs enslaved us first and taught the Europeans how to conduct themselves in the slave trade in Africa. They never have any smoke for Muslims or Islam. It's always for the Christians. But when it comes to the Christians, all of these other groups, even the devil worshippers, even the devil worshippers, they want Christians to have proof. They want them to have a report. They want God to come down from heaven and introduce themselves to them, right? You even got people who are promoting voodoo to black people, as if black people didn't have voodoo. Our ancestors didn't have voodoo when they came here, when they were enslaved. You ever heard of a little place called Louisiana, right? They practice voodoo in the islands. Where do you think they got that from? So our people had voodoo. They still didn't wind up being free. The voodoo didn't free them. As much as people want to say Christianity didn't do anything for black people, well, what did voodoo do? What did Islam do? What is devil worship been doing? What is witchcraft doing? But all of these other groups get around people who identify as Christian and say, give us proof that there is a God. Give us proof that your God exists. Give us proof that he's there. Give us proof, while offering none for their belief system. I was born and raised in the South. When somebody says, this person over here was working roots, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about voodoo. That's what it's referred to down south as working roots. And they got their asses right down here with the Christian black folks in the same stuff, still being disenfranchised and mistreated. No different. Voodoo and killing chickens and spitting blood and burying draws and all that. That hadn't set nobody free yet. Okay? It ain't set nobody free yet. Over there in Africa, they still over there practicing it. You got people, I made a video about that. People over there dancing in, grass skirts with all these old funny masks on, dancing and jiggling. And every time they take a step, they stepping on diamonds and rubies and emeralds and gold and just can barely have enough to eat. But they practicing the voodoo and they living in their own land that's rich with resources. Okay, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. I'm sitting here in peace. I went out somewhere and I decided to go ahead and make this video. And now, black people have showed up and started to make it the Boogie Woogie Club right here next to where I'm parked. So, if you hear the music in the background, that's them. Okay, that's them, and it's them. All right, you guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. I will be so happy to have you. You guys have a great day, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks.